Manx Radio's Update with Beth Espey.
Fastamai, good evening. How are you? Hope you've had a good day so far. It's time to bring you up to speed with what's been happening news-wise on the Isle of Man so far today. So before 5:30, we'll bring you details about the pay consultation nurses on the island are being urged to take part in. The chair of the Housing Board promises that the issue of accommodation for prison leavers is being looked into. And one of Laxey's new residents is looking forward to the next season of motorbike racing. Can you guess who that might be? We'll also check out the latest weather. We'll keep an eye on the traffic and travel as well. And as ever, if you'd like to get in touch, we'd love to hear from you. You can text 166 177 or email studio@manxradio.com. First, let's join Lewis for a roundup of today's main news headlines.
Fastamai, the Isle of Man Constabulary, says it's in mourning following the death of one of its sergeants. Stephen Kenneth Hall died yesterday evening. The circumstances of his death will be subject to a coroner's inquest, but police say they're not treating it as suspicious. What can Douglas Council gain from selling the former Lord Street flats?
We don't think that the housing crisis can just be solved by throwing money at the problem. We have to develop a strategic plan and policy at the exact same time.
That's Chair of the Housing Committee, Devon Watson, who claims up to 50 new homes could be created if the block is redeveloped and additional social housing created elsewhere using money from the sale. The body that helps set the island's minimum wage is seeking feedback on plans to transition the rate to the living wage next April. The Minimum Wage Committee says current government policy would mean putting the rate up to around £13.73. It's asking for views from interested parties on the wider social and economic implications. And Manx motorcycle racer Nathan Harrison says he will be racing at next year's TT and Northwest 200, despite not being part of Honda Racing UK for 2025. The Onken man hasn't been included in the manufacturer's lineup for next season. However, he will receive support from them to compete in the Superbike, Super Stock and Super Sport classes at both events. In the latest international news, the arrest of a man suspected of supplying boats for people smugglers in the Channel's been described as a milestone in one of the most significant investigations of its kind. The National Crime Agency says a Turkish man's been detained in the Netherlands. Craig Turner is from the NCA.
This individual has been suspected of being one of the most prolific suppliers of engines, boats and other maritime equipment to cross-channel smugglers.
The UK Prime Minister's called the man's arrest a significant piece of the jigsaw. The UK Chancellor's expected to set out plans for what she calls the biggest pension reform in decades. In a major speech, Rachel Reeves will say she wants to merge funds from councils and spend it on infrastructure investments. And Apple's facing a lawsuit over its iCloud storage, which is accusing the tech giant of ripping people off by forcing its services on customers, but the company denies the claims. Those are the headlines. I'll be back with the news at 6 o'clock.
Thanks very much, Lewis. Now the weather brought to you by Manx Glass and Glazing. So pretty cloudy this evening, an increasing risk of some outbreaks of drizzle as well. Staying mild though, light winds and lowest temperatures around 10. It really did feel pretty warm today, didn't it? It'll be overcast tomorrow. There will be further outbreaks of drizzle, light to moderate, mainly southwest winds. Top temperatures tomorrow will be around 12. And then if we just look ahead to the weekend, there will be a spell of rain overnight into Saturday. Then it'll be mostly dry. Just isolated showers and moderate to fresh northwest winds, and top temperatures on Saturday will be 11, so it is getting a little bit colder. Sunset this evening was at 4:18. Sunrise tomorrow morning will be at 7:47.
Manx Glass and Glazing can supply and install single, double and triple glazing. Call 674 573 or visit the showroom on the Snugborough Trading Estate.
TE Carbon provide new memorial stones, grave renovations, new inscriptions and fire hearths. Visit us at Hope Street, Castletown, or at Broadway, Douglas, or call 844 440. TE Carbon, here when you need us.
Most builders start with a hammer and saw. Manx Construction start with ideas and imagination. For new build, extension or home office, Manx Construction offer full service from planning to completion. Call Tony on 452 688.
We all need need peace of mind. That's where Peace of Mind Manx Will Writing Services can help you. From just £149 plus VAT. Call 671 001 or go to peaceofmind.co.im.
At Bond Fabrics, we're not just a fabric shop. As well as curtains and upholstery and dress and costume fabrics, we've knitting and crocheting wools, made-to-measure curtain and blind service, plus poles and tracks. Visit Strand Street, Douglas, call 611856 or see bondfabrics.im.
You're listening to Update here on Manx Radio. It's just gone 5:05. Well, this afternoon, senior managers at Manx Care faced questions from a Tynwald committee with significant focus on the health body's budget and financial planning. Chief Executive Teresa Cope was asked when the health service would have clarity on its expected deliverables and associated costs.
In an ideal world, you would have a very clear specification for the service that Manx Care is being asked to deliver. If we had a clear specification, Manx Care could then cost it and understand the workforce requirements of delivering that and the KPIs which sit with delivering against that particular specification. And if we did that for every service we had, with built-in efficiency through the KPIs, we would have a collective understanding of this is the service we want, this is the workforce we need to deliver it, this is what it's going to cost, and therefore you have that confidence that sits within a quantum of funding that you have available. And then you can overlay assumptions around pay inflation, around other inflation, around new services we may be mandated to provide. But Mr Glover, we don't have that level of transparency across the system, partly because given where we are in the separation, we're just not mature enough either as Manx Care or DHSC. But as Oliver has also alluded to, the data and information which sits underneath all of that is still not as mature as it could be in order to inform that. We are so much further on than where we were 3 years ago, and I think this year the change of approach, we will have a really good go at describing what the indicative budget buys in terms of service delivery for the island.
That is the Chief Executive of Manx Care, Teresa Cope, speaking at that Tynwald committee session this afternoon. It's just coming up to 7.5 minutes past 5. And we're going to stay with Manx Care and specifically nursing now, because nursing staff are being urged to take part in a new consultation about their pay. Siobhan is with me now in the studio with some details about this. Siobhan, what do we know?
The Royal College of Nursing is surveying its members employed by Manx Care about a 4% pay offer for 2024-25 over the next 2 weeks. The regional director for the RCN in the North West, that's Stephanie Dunn, says they want as many members as possible to vote in the survey once they receive the link. She says that it's up to members whether they think the offer is acceptable or not, and adds this is the only way they can express the membership's strength of feeling to Manx Care and the Isle of Man government about how valued the nursing workforce are feeling.
So do we know what period this offer covers?
Yeah, so the offer dates back to the 1st of April this year, but it doesn't include back pay for those who've already left Manx Care in the months since then. Ms Dunn says they've challenged Manx Care on this matter, as those members have already worked those hours and deserve to be paid for them correctly in retrospect. She adds the union is not recommending how members should vote, but that they are asking that they do vote. The consultative survey is now open and will close at 12 noon on Thursday the 28th of November.
Siobhan, thank you very much. As ever, you can find more details at manxradio.com. And we are going to stay on the theme of pay because the body that helps set the island's minimum wage is seeking feedback on plans to transition the rate to the living wage next April. Now, the Minimum Wage Committee says current government policy would mean putting the rate up to around £13.73. Sian Cowper reports.
Enterprise Minister Tim Johnston has asked the committee to make recommendations on changes that would come into force in April 2025. As a result, the panel is asking for views from interested parties on the wider social and economic implications of any minimum wage, how it affects employment and inflation, and the interaction between the figure and the tax and benefit system. The committee highlights that Government's Island Plan includes a commitment to transition minimum wage to the living wage by April next year. It says it would be particularly keen to hear about the feasibility of the timing of this change and the impact it would have on the wider economy. It would also welcome feedback concerning business viability, the cost of living and the competitiveness of the island internationally. Minimum wage on the Isle of Man currently sits at £11.45, while living wage is £13.5. Recently, UK Chancellor Rachel Reeves announced plans to increase the UK's minimum wage from £11.44 to £12.21.
That is Sean Cowper reporting 5:10. The Ramsey branch of Lloyds will close in February next year, and it's because of a significant drop, they say, in the number of people visiting there. Between 2018 and 2023, personal customer transactions at the Parliament Street outlet fell by around a third. So the bank will close on the 10th of February. People are being advised to use the Villiers House branch in Douglas or the Lloyds banking services that's in the post offices instead. Lewis asked Ramsey Commissioner Ewan McGuinness how he felt when he heard this news.
Disappointment, really. I think local banking, high street banking, especially in a town like Ramsey, is integral to the community. It's more than just somewhere you get some money out or pay some money in. It's a lifeline, and it's a real sort of community aspect. And losing, after HSBC went in recent years, losing Lloyds, Barclays reducing its hours, it's a real loss to the town and a real shame.
Footfall has dropped by a third. It stands to reason then that 2/3 of the regular customers are still relying on that bank. So do you think there's still enough people there that they should reconsider this?
I'd hope so. I think the loss of a third is quite a low number to make such a large change. I'd be surprised if they will consider it. Sadly, I think a large retail bank such as Lloyds probably cares very little about a town like Ramsey, but it would be nice if they did have second thoughts, because I think the impact to those 2/3 of customers will be huge.
That's Ramsey Commissioner Ewan McGuinness. Well, a spokesperson for Lloyds Bank has told us that mobile banking is more popular than ever, with visits to our Ramsey branch falling significantly over time. They say customers can continue to bank with us through our app, online and over the phone, alongside accessing cash at nearby free-to-use ATMs. Well, we did ask for clarification over whether there would be any redundancies as a result of the decision. It's understood a small number of employees may be impacted by the change, and they are being provided with the support they need, whether they wish to find a role in another part of the business or indeed with another company. So we know it is going to close on the 10th of February last year, and as we say, people advised to use the Villiers House branch in Douglas or the Lloyds banking services and post offices instead in Ramsey and Peel. Any thoughts on that? There'll be much more on breakfast tomorrow morning, 166 177, or you can email studio@manxradio.com. It's 12.5 minutes past 5, and all this week we've been hearing about professionals in the Isle of Man marking Safeguarding Week. And today we are talking MASH. No, I'm not talking about potatoes, even though it's nearly tea time. If you've heard any of our series of special reports, you will have heard of the Multi-Agency Safeguarding Hub. But what is MASH, and how do the various teams we've spoken to this week fit into the picture? Well, Sam Cannell, the Isle of Man Constabulary's Detective Inspector for Protecting Vulnerable People, explains.
The Multi-Agency Safeguarding Hub came together when, as a partnership, we realised that our information sharing could be better, it could be slicker, and it's certainly what the national movement is too, in terms of multi-agencies moving together. And effectively what it looks like, there's no mystery to it. It's a bunch of professionals all representing different agencies working in the same room, in the same environment, and being able to share information really, really quick time in order for there to be a much more rapid response to a concern. So that could be a general concern about child neglect or abuse, or it could be, for instance, a concern around child sexual or criminal exploitation.
How does the police slot into that then?
So the Constabulary is, amongst all the agencies, the largest referrer of safeguarding information and concern into the hub. And that's really because we go out on a day-to-day basis, multiple times a day, into people's homes, and we come across situations and we respond to calls for service, to concerns within the community. So we are the largest referrer of information of concern, because generally when we come across a safeguarding concern, could be the condition of a home address in which a child is living, or it could be we've come across a child who is dealing drugs on the street, for instance. And if a child is dealing drugs on the street and they're under 18, well, actually, they're probably being exploited by someone, and they're being either paid with money or in other ways to do that. And that is exploitation, and that's what we see. And I think to a certain extent, in recent years, maybe we've not acknowledged that that's what it is, but that's what it is. We need to label it and we need to tackle it.
That is Sam Cannell from the police, the Detective Inspector for Protecting Vulnerable People. It's a huge issue, this, and it's a reason it's being marked here on the Isle of Man. You can find out much more, some really detailed articles at manxradio.com.
Manx Radio Travel, driven by Quayside Tyres and Service Centre.
Well, as far as we're aware, no issues on the road. Certainly the police reporting nothing specific this evening. Down at the airport, all looking okay. That London City flight earlier was cancelled, but you'll probably know about that if you were affected. And looking at the steam packet, the Manxman is due into Douglas at around 5 to 6 and will be leaving for Heysham again at 19:45.
Ask how you can spread the cost interest-free at Quayside.
It's just gone 5:15. The Isle of Man government needs to ensure bail accommodation is right and appropriate for those who are leaving prison. Now, that comes from the chair of the Housing and Communities Board, who was on Man in Line this afternoon. A listener raised reports of recent court cases in which people were unable to be released as there was no suitable accommodation available for them. It's something we have talked about here on Update. But David Ashford, MHK, insists the issue is being looked into.
It's deeply concerning. Prison shouldn't be being used in any way, shape or form as an accommodation centre. I am aware of the two particular cases, and I believe in one of them there was a solution found eventually, particularly around someone who was due for release from prison but didn't have anywhere to go. There is the emergency housing pathway which can be utilised if necessary, but there is also, we have to remember, a lot of the people, particularly ones who are awaiting sentence for something, sometimes there can be bail conditions on them as well. So for instance, if there's actual alcohol offences involved, they're not allowed to go anywhere near licensed premises. So that means that, for instance, some of the B&B accommodation that could be provided for them, if that B&B holds a licence, they can't be put up there because they'd actually be in breach of their bail conditions. So there is some nuancing with certain individuals that makes it very difficult to find them emergency accommodation if they need it. And that's the same from those being released from prison. I know, for instance, there's been one particular case very recently of someone being released that has taken a long while to solve. It has now been solved. But yeah, we need to ensure that bail accommodation is right. And I know that the Minister for Justice and Home Affairs has been looking at this within the Department of Home Affairs, because I've raised it previously. And we need to make sure that that is absolutely right, because nobody should be staying in prison simply because there isn't appropriate accommodation for them.
That is the chair of the Housing and Communities Board, David Ashford, who was on Man in Line with Andy this lunchtime. He was on there with Devon Watson, the Douglas councillor. They covered a lot of ground. If you'd like to listen back, you can do as a podcast, or you can watch it back as well if you just go to our Facebook or YouTube pages. And it's a great example of the fact that we have the politicians in and you have direct access to them when they are live on Man in Line. You can phone in with your questions, speak to them directly, and hopefully get some of the answers you might be looking for. 18 minutes past 5. Some good news now. The Chief Executive Officer at the Manx Wildlife Trust says the charity is just delighted to be among 281 groups recognised by King Charles for their voluntary service. Now, the CAVs are the MBE equivalent for voluntary groups in the UK and the Crown dependencies. And Lee Morris told us it is a well-deserved award for all the dedicated 500 volunteers at the Trust.
Manx Wildlife Trust is rooted in volunteering, and you know, from the people that set this up, Felicity and William Kane and Roger Pullin and other key people, you know, and Roger Pullin's still very much involved in the charity. Felicity Kane still volunteers in our shop every week. They set up an established Manx Wildlife Trust back in 1973, and for the first 20 plus years, it was entirely run by volunteers. And today, although we have a small staff team, without the volunteers, we would not be able to operate as a charity. And I could cite so many examples of volunteers of what they do for us across a whole spectrum of our work. So it's fantastic recognition for the volunteers that had the vision and bluntly the hard work and the energy to set up Manx Wildlife Trust, establish it, sustain it, and deliver over the years some really notable successes and benefits for Manx nature and the Isle of Man.
Oh, definitely. How many volunteers do you have on the island, or do you have with the Manx Wildlife Trust?
We have a spreadsheet now, a database, if you like, and it's just on 500. And that range from our trustees, so the highest level of the charity, our board of trustees and our chair, Simon, the people that maintain our nature reserves, and that's the midweek muckers that go out on Tuesdays and Thursdays, the Ballacurry bashers in the south, and the recent group of Oncombe Wetlanders. We've got the group that run the shop. They run our events. Our Festival of the Sea is almost entirely volunteer run. We've got volunteers, 500 of them right now, doing a huge amount of work and really striving to help us. But over the years, over 51 plus years, there'll be thousands of people that have volunteered for Manx Wildlife Trust. And this award is for every single one of them.
How brilliant is that? That's a Chief Executive Officer at the Manx Wildlife Trust, Lee Morris, talking about them being recognised by King Charles for their voluntary service. 500 volunteers is incredible, I think, especially nowadays. And they've got some great names, haven't they? Muckers and bashers. I'll leave it there. 5:20 now. After his high-profile move in 2024, the TT competitor Dean Harrison says it is brilliant to remain with Honda Racing UK for the next season. He tells us now how his first campaign with the manufacturer has been and how he and his family have settled on the island after moving here from their native Yorkshire earlier this year.
It's been a good year. It's been a little bit up and down at times, but all in all, I think there's been more positives than negatives.
You say there's been positives and negatives. What are those positives and negatives, would you say?
Well, let's start with the negatives first. Negatives, obviously, like the TT, for example, the Northwest, we had a couple of technical problems which sort of held us back a little bit. But then the fantastic thing about Honda, they recognised those problems, got straight to work on it, fixed them, and then the positives are, once the fixes came, it proved how strong the bike was as the year went on. So if we carry on at the trajectory of the rate of improvement that we're going at, I think it's looking good for the future.
For you personally as well, to have this clarity already going into the next season at a time of the year where it can be a bit of a merry-go-round sometimes, what peace of mind does that give you?
For me, it's brilliant because it makes you more mentally settled, I'd say, because if you're sort of trying to think about what team you're going to be in, what bikes you want to be riding, and different teams have different bikes, so if you don't fit in at that team but the other team runs different manufacturers, everything can be a little bit of an unknown, whereas to have everything sort of done, sewed up now, it is great for me. It just means that I can have full focus on the bikes that I've already ridden this year. I'm running the same bikes next year, so it almost makes me feel settled that I already know what to expect to a certain level.
You are now an island resident. Your family are here now. How have you all found this newer way of life outside of Yorkshire?
I wish I'd done it earlier, to be honest. Honestly, where I live in Laxey, it's a lovely place to be. The missus, she works down at Laxey Dental. The kids are both in Laxey School, and honestly, the community around the whole area is absolutely fantastic. I can't thank people enough, really. Honestly, everywhere I've gone, everyone's been so nice, polite, and everyone you meet, everyone's really nice, so it makes it a nice place to be. So no, I'm absolutely over the moon with the move.
And he was over the moon to speak to Rob as well. That is Dean Harrison, the TT competitor who is staying with Honda Racing UK for next season. Sports editor Rob is with me now, and what I want to know, Rob, is in the TT programme next year, will he have Isle of Man next to his name?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I'd love to know the answer to that. I'm sure we'll find out in the not too distant future.
We certainly will. We've got some more motorcycle news though.
We have indeed. Well, we've heard from Dean Harrison there on his new deal with Honda Racing UK for 2025. One of those who wasn't included in Honda's lineup for next year was Manxman Nathan Harrison. Well, on that subject, Nathan Harrison says he will be racing at next year's TT and Northwest 200 despite not being part of Honda's setup for next year. Well, the Onca man who's been with Honda for the last two campaigns has not been included in the manufacturer's latest 5-strong lineup, which was announced earlier this week. Instead, he'll receive support from Honda as he competes in the Superbike, Superstock and Supersport categories at the two road racing events next year. Harrison is also thanking Honda Racing UK team manager Javier Beltran for his continued support over the upcoming year, adding he will announce more details in due course as these plans are finalised. Sticking with motorsport for the moment, and there are hopes it'll be take two to get the Macau Motorcycle Grand Prix underway later tonight. The first free practice for the event, which again includes some big stars in road racing, had been due to start shortly before midnight UK time last night. However, the bike session was called off due to poor weather conditions. As a result, some changes have been made to the programme. Free practice for two-wheeled machines will now take place at around 11:45pm UK time this evening, with first and only qualifying tomorrow at 8:15am UK time. Separately, it's already been confirmed organisers have been having to take action to prepare for potentially severe weather in the region as Macau experiences the effects of a tropical cyclone. In football, St George's AFC has withdrawn its combination team from this season with immediate effect. Confirming the decision, the Isle of Man Football Association says this is due to the team experiencing player shortage issues. The Douglas-based club reintroduced their combi squad this season and managed to get teams on the field for their opening 3 games on the 31st of August, 4th of September and 7th of September. Since then, the St George's combination side has conceded its following 8 fixtures as walkovers to the opposition due to being unable to field a squad. And officials in Manx Hockey are calling on the community for help in providing its umpires with the chance to develop their skills off island. The Isle of Man Hockey Umpires Association has announced it's hoping to send some of its members to officiate matches in the UK. However, the organisation says this will only be possible with financial assistance from local businesses, and as a result would like to hear from any companies who'd be willing to offer them support. Any businesses interested in finding out more details or would consider providing sponsorship is asked to contact the Isle of Man Hockey Umpires Association via email on either MHA-secretary, all one word, all lowercase, at outlook.com, or Manx Hockey Chair, all one word, all lowercase, at gmail.com.
Thank you very much indeed, Rob. Presumably those details available in the sports pages at manxradio.com. Do you think that is the first time you've had to use the words tropical cyclone in a sports report?
I can confirm it is the first time.
We've marked it here now. Let's hope we don't have to mention it too many more times. Rob, thank you very much indeed. And thank you very much for being with us, because that is pretty much all from Update this evening. Hopefully, now you're across what's been happening news-wise, so plenty to talk about when you get home tonight. For more on all today's top stories, go to manxradio.com. Remember, we also have the newscast and the sportscast as well. They are the longer interviews. We can't play a whole interview on air, but you will be able to feast your ears, if that's not a strange thing to say, for the longer interview on the website. Coming up next on Manx Radio this evening, it's Shaq Lay at 5:30 with Fiona McCardle. Then Greatest Hits from 6 with Chris Kinley. It's an extended programme tonight because we're going to bring you the result live from tonight's Onken Commissioners by-election as soon as it happens. Christian Jones will be there reporting for Manx Radio. And then Rianne will be with you from 10 with After Hours. Whatever you're doing this evening then, have a great one, and we will see you back here at 5pm tomorrow.